morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the RDA Central West Business Leaders Breakfast. I'm really excited that you're able to join us for the last business breakfast of 2020. And joining me in the hot seat, we have the member for Barwon, Mr. Roy Butler. Welcome to breakfast.
Morning, Sam. Thank you.
Great to have you here, Roy. I know you've got a massive electorate and probably one of the harder jobs in New South Wales Parliament. But for those that don't know you, you've got quite an interesting journey that brought you to public office. But can you tell us about that and a little bit about your electorate?
Sure. Well, we might start with the electorate. Barwon, as you say, is a vast electorate. It's 356,000 square kilometres, 13 local government areas and the unincorporated area where there is no local government. That's 93,000 square kilometres, 27 hospitals and MPSs, 91 schools, about 200 localities and communities. So all with their own unique issues, some common issues, but they often manifest in a unique way in each community. So there's a lot to be across, a lot to understand. In terms of what brought me here, I was on a pretty good trajectory working in the public service. I'd had 20 years in the public service. I've worked for 3 agencies and 17 of those years were across the Barwon electorate. So the final 10 before I was elected was as the Region Manager, Western Region Police, which gave me not only a really good network across the electorate of people, but also knowledge of communities and what was going on in communities, because we had, daily synopsis and summaries that would come out. So that really helped. In terms of how I got into politics, 2017 I was elected to a sporting board, a statewide sporting board with 68,000 members, and I went straight from sort of rank and file to senior vice president, which was unusual at the time. And I was approached then by the SFF. I'd always been a member of the SFF, but had never really considered going into politics that much. So they spoke to me, and I sort of spoke to my wife about it and said, well, this is going to sound a bit simplistic, but I thought, well, I don't want to, if I've got the opportunity to do something to improve the quality of life for people in regional New South Wales, I don't want to be on my deathbed, however long I'm going to live for. I don't want to be on my deathbed and wondering, could I have made a difference? Could I have done something different? So I agreed, and we started the campaign on the 28th of March 2019 in Patton Park in Broken Hill, remember the day. And then on the 5th of November, I took full-time leave and hitched up my caravan and basically travelled the electorate from November through till the day of the election. And I think the number that still scares me and probably scares my wife is I only spent 7 nights in my own bed over that 5-month period. The rest of it in the caravan, some nights 40 degrees, no air conditioning, sitting there waiting for it to cool down enough to go to sleep, which is often about 2 or 3 in the morning. So it was a long, hard slog, and it still is, but at least now we've got got better air conditioning and motel rooms, which makes it a bit more comfortable.
Creature comforts. Look, we might talk about that journey to elected office a little bit later, but I was really interested when I read through your maiden speech. You've got quite a diverse history before you entered public office. You were in the Army, worked at Corrective Services, and you've also got a Masters of Public Administration. How do you think these experiences supported your transition into public office?
Look, there's probably a whole lot of things that you haven't mentioned there that have contributed to a transition into public office. The Masters was a great qualification. It was across multiple jurisdictions all across Australia and New Zealand, including the Cook Islands and other small places. And we kept forming teams of project teams, and then we disband a project team, form another one. So I got to learn about cemeteries in WA. I got to learn about what happens in other jurisdictions, how they deal with problems, which is immensely helpful, and also builds a huge network across not just New South Wales but across the country. And a lot of the people I studied with ended up as directors, deputy directors of departments, so that helps as well. In terms of other work that I've done, the Army was something I'm very proud of. I joined the Army when I was 17, had to be signed in by my mother, and went to Kapooka, did my 3 months at Kapooka, then my OT training at Brisbane because Singleton was full, so we lived in 10 by 10 tents, had bucket showers, and a thing called a Zeta light burn washing machine, which basically has one switch, you turn it on, and if you stick your hand in, it gets caught in the clothes, it'll break your arm. I went into infantry, reconnaissance and sniper platoon, also did a visual tracking course at Tully, and the B2 motorcycle course riding around Glasshouse Mountains and Fraser Island, which doesn't sound half bad. From there, went back to study. I did a postgraduate diploma in addictions counselling, group psychotherapy, worked in 3 prisons in New South Wales. That's John Moroney 1, John Moroney 2 and Parkloo. And then was contracting back of an evening, running offender management programs in places like Mount Druitt and Blacktown, and I was contacted by the region director who said, come and see me, and he said, look, you're making a bit of a name for yourself doing this, would you like to coordinate offender management programs across Western New South Wales? And I said, well, yeah, we'd had our first child, and I thought, well, the difference in the salary from working as a drug and alcohol counsellor to coordinating made up the difference for the contracting. And then I got home, more frequently in an earlier hour. So I took that up and did that for about 2.5, 3 years, and then I went to applied for a job with DADIC, the Department of Ageing, Disability and Home Care, and at that time DADIC had just separated from what we used to call DOCs, now called FACS. So that gave me experience not only working with my own teams of occupational therapists, speech pathologists, psychologists, physiotherapists and caseworkers, and we were delivering services to people with intellectual disabilities across a huge part of regional New South Wales. But it also gave me some insights into the child protection system because of the interaction we had between DADIC and DOCs at the time. And from there, 2009, I applied for and won the position of Region Manager, Western Region Police, which covers 64% of the state, including the whole of the Barwon electorate, but it also took in places like Moree, Tamworth, Euston, Balranald, Parkes, Orange, Forbes, that sort of whole bigger area. So I was able then for the 10 years to spend time travelling around the electorate and also the communities that were outside the electorate. Some of them were doing better, some of them not doing so well. But what I'd seen over a period of time was I'd seen population decrease, I'd seen more and more empty shop fronts, and it kind of drove me to say when I was offered that opportunity in 2017 to stand for pre-selection, well, again, what will I want to look back on my life and think and say if I had the opportunity to do something? And so that's how I found myself here. But all of those experiences, I think, in a lot of ways have really given me not only insights into government departments and how they work. I mean, I've been the guy replying to ministerials before in agencies, so I know how that whole system works and what gets traction and what doesn't. But also the study has helped, not just through the networks, but through the knowledge that it gives you.
Yeah, and look, very extensive, diverse background that you've got there. Probably matches the diversity of your electorate, which I believe is bigger than Germany.
Yes.
But what do you think has been one of the biggest challenges representing such a large and diverse electorate since March 2019?
Oh, look, so the size of the electorate and getting your head around the electorate is one of the challenges, and I've had staff who have come on board who have just been unable to do that, unable to realise just how the scope and size of it. In terms of the 13 local government areas, I've got colleagues in Parliament who have 12 square kilometres and have one local government area and maybe a hospital, and that's it, whereas, as I said, we've run through the numbers, Barwon is a huge electorate and it's unique in the New South Wales Parliament. So understanding all of that, but then trying to, when I work with the ministers and speak to them about Barwon, trying to impress upon them just how different Barwon is. And a cookie cutter policy that comes out of Sydney is not something you can just pick up and drop into a regional community. You need to understand the context of that community, what drives it, what its values are. Otherwise, policies that are city-centric just don't work.
Yeah, and look, one of the things that kind of flows on from that is an interesting thing you mentioned in your maiden speech. We've kind of coming out of the worst impacts of the drought. If we've driven in here, driven around in recent times, you've seen some good crops and some good yields starting to come off. But you mentioned and you talked about the socioeconomic drought. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that and what you meant in your speech?
Sure. So internationally, there's been a bit of an effort to try and classify drought. So the first and most obvious form of drought is what we call meteorological drought, which is just lack of rain. There's just not as much rain falling from the sky. So if that goes on long enough, you move to what they call hydrological drought. Hydrological drought is a lack of water in our storages, aquifers and rivers. So by that time, that's starting to impact on agriculture, starting to impact on town supplies. That's when you start to see water restrictions and those sorts of things coming into towns. A socioeconomic drought is basically what comes after extended hydrological drought. So at that point, you're not getting new money into town. And Barwon has diverse communities, as you've said. Some of them are agriculture dependent. Some of them depend on tourism and agriculture. Now, tourism and agriculture are two things you pretty much lose when you don't have a good domestic supply and you don't have water for agriculture. So straight up, there's two things that would bring new money in, but don't bring new money in if they're not happening. Once you get to that point, I mean, we've got some towns that were a bit more resilient through the drought because they've got the diversification through mining, which does still operate through drought. But yeah, everything that we do in Western New South Wales needs water. So if you don't have water and you're in a socio-economic drought, then there's no new money coming in. It's essentially a market failure. And whilst government loves a free market, and I get that, when there's market failure, that's when there's a role for state and federal governments to step in and say, right, well, we're going to address the market failure by providing this incentive or this subsidy. And your listeners, your members would know that because I'm big on financial literacy, and I've actually just bought books for all the schools in Barwon about a secondary book, Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and a primary book called What Do Kids Need to Know About Finance, because that's something that's a bit of a hobby horse of mine, to make sure that people actually know, they understand the difference between being an employee, self-employed, a business owner, and an investor before they get out into the world, understand their tax obligations, their superannuation obligations, understand credit. Your listeners would understand credit, and a lot of the offerings that were on the table during the drought were loan-based. Now, under the APRA lending rules, if you're deep in a hole of debt, you've got no prospect of income, it's very hard to qualify for a loan, which is why we were pushing all through the drought that some assistance at least need to be cash-based. We need to get cash out into communities, it need to be new money. We know that money stays in a community when it hits the community for a period of time. There's one story that it circulates 7 times before it leaves, gets paid on insurance or rego or something else, and goes out of the town. But getting new money into the towns was the problem during the socioeconomic drought, and that's why I sort of kept banging on in Parliament about the need for cash-based incentives and cash-based assistance.
Yeah, look, there have been a number of stimulus measures that have been rolled out, some really well received from both state and federal government. But one of the things that we've really noticed around the Central West has been that return of confidence. With it, just add water, there's confidence around town. You can see it just where we are today in Condo. But have you seen that reflected in a lot of the different smaller communities as that kind of rain has returned and that confidence has returned?
Absolutely, 100%. So I was talking to you off air. I spend a lot of time in the car, so that means driving through towns, through main streets. And a year ago, when you drove down a main street, there wasn't this sense of optimism. There wasn't a sense of hope. It actually was getting pretty hopeless at one stage there. So February, March, the rain we had, that buoyed spirits, and now the crops that we've had, I mean, this season surpassed 2016 and probably will surpass 1996 in terms of the volume of grain. The advice I've had is that the price of the grain should be in the top 10th percentile. So not only is it a big crop, it's a quality crop, which means that money comes in, everyone gets a slice of the action, the whole supply chain, your contractors, your labourers, your chaser bin drivers, everyone gets a bit of the action. Then they go spend money in the town. It means more part-time and semi-permanent employment in town, and business owners get a slice of that as well. So interestingly, the tourism was huge between June and October. That 5 months, there's a lot of people who said to me, a lot of operators out west, whether they're in direct tourism or just cafes and restaurants, they said that 5 months was actually the best year that we've had in a long time. So there was a lot of people. I was in Tibooburra in October. There was about 400 people at the caravan park. You couldn't move. I was out there again last week, and there was about 3 of us in the caravan park. So we've really got to try and find ways to extend the stay of people when they come out, get them to stay longer, have more meals, have more bed nights, spend more time in the town. So that's something that I know that people are working towards.
And that's a beautiful segue to a Fast Five. It's where we hit our special guests with 5 quick questions to learn a little bit more about them. Last book you read or movie you watched?
Resident Evil Apocalypse last night.
Okay, good. Favourite holiday destination in regional New South Wales and overseas?
Look, this is probably going to come off a bit strange, but if I had the opportunity to take some time off, I'd probably spend it at home.
Okay, and home is at Mendoran, I believe?
Mendoran, yeah. I'm very happy with where I live. I live on 1,000 acres, and my family's there. So, if I had time to do anything that was self-indulgent, it would be spending time with my family.
And overseas?
Oh well.
I know it might be a while till we can do it.
No. Look, I'm still smitten with Southeast Asia. So I took my kids. We went backpacking for 5 weeks, living out of 7-kilogram backpacks in 2017. I took them through Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and it was a huge eye-opener. I love going to third world countries because it helps me to appreciate how lucky we are.
Hidden gem of the Central West. So this can be a person, a place, or a venue.
Question.
I know, loaded question. You can impress some of the communities of your electorate, but you might isolate a few others.
No, we're full of them, honestly. And the people who really are the real heroes in our communities are the volunteers, the ones who give up their time with no expectation of reward, give up their time to make their communities better places to live. So I would say that our hidden gems are all our volunteers.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. Favourite sporting code and team?
Yeah, look, I'm allowed to say Clay Target Shooting.
Okay. Well, I'm now putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I'm assuming that may have been the organisation that you were the vice president of.
Sporting Shooters Association. So
Okay.
ACTA is the Australian Clay Target. I used to be the president of the Mendoran Gun Club, but did that for 7 years, but now obviously can't. But I haven't even, I've shot clay targets twice in 3 years.
Okay. No, I have done it once or twice. It's quite an enjoyable pastime. Top 3 tips, bit out there, but top 3 tips for a young person looking to engage in public office.
Yeah, so take a deep breath. Realise that your life won't be your own. You're owned by your electorate, basically, and this is a big thing to get your head around. So often I see politicians who are elected and then think they're important. They're not important, they've got an important job. The people they represent are important, not them. So that was a long tip. But the key thing though is they have to care. If you don't care, you won't do this job. You have to genuinely care for the people who you represent, because you won't drive the extra 100 Ks, you won't spend the extra night away from home, you won't spend the extra time on the phone to people if you don't care. Yeah,
no, that's really good advice. It's not just a job, it's a vocation, I guess, because it's all encompassing, and I think that's a really fair point. Now, one of the things that we've really focused on is capacity building this year at RDA Central West. We've done a youth leadership program, but what's a piece of advice you've had from a previous mentor that stayed with you and still supports you to this day?
I'm probably going to answer your question in a way that's not directly the way you want it to, but I've had some amazing people in my life, leaders who have shown me ways that I would like to be led and ways I'd like to lead people. Conversely, I've had people who in leadership positions who I don't think should be in leadership positions, which showed me how I wouldn't want to be treated and how I wouldn't want to treat people. So I think it's an amalgam of all of that comes together that gives me my own way of approaching things in this role and in any role.
And you probably had a lot of challenges this year, like we all have, because it's such an unprecedented circumstance that we've navigated. But what have you learned about yourself as a regional leader in 2020?
Yeah, I think I thought long and hard about that one. I think that what I've learned about myself, and I knew a bit of this from the army and from other jobs that I've had and other things I've done, is you never know just how far you can go, and you never know how much you can do and how much gas you've got left in the tank until you try and push it. And so what I've found, and I know some members of my team have probably worked just as hard as me, when it comes to saying, well, we're going to fit that extra meeting in, we're going to fit that extra drive to the next town in. Through this, I think people have really been looking to their leaders, people can call me a leader if they want. I see myself as a representative, not as a leader as such. But they were looking to local members for guidance, they were looking to local members for advice, they were looking to local members to reassure them about what was happening and what was going to happen. So a lot of our time over this last 12 months has been spent doing just that, trying to make sure that people had the right advice at the right time, whether they were business owners in terms of the COVID restrictions. Those lockdowns in April and May were crippling, for businesses that were already trading thinly off the back of drought. So as soon as I had the opportunity to talk to Hazard about, because in July it looked like we were going back into another lockdown, I said, mate, look, regional New South Wales, we haven't had the problems, we haven't had the cases. Why don't we let people continue with social distancing, hand sanitation, and follow the health guidelines? And if we have a situation that we need to deal with, we'll deal with it on a localised basis. And that's the approach that was taken. And I'm very happy with that, because it means that we've had that great tourist season and we've had obviously good harvest. So hopefully it's a sign that things are going to change for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I share your optimism. I think it's going to be a positive 2021. And we've touched on the renewed confidence in the ag sector across Western New South Wales. There's also been a number of important infrastructure investments across Barwon in recent times. Can you tell us a couple of those, especially where we are this morning around Condo, that have you've been proud to see delivered, and how that's been received by the local tradies and the local communities?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to this, and first and foremost is we need to make sure that the work on those projects doesn't go to out-of-state companies. It needs to go to local companies, local businesses, local councils, so the money can stay in the community. I think that probably the crown and the jewel at the moment for Condo is the 2 million plus 18 million for water infrastructure. The 3 bore fields, getting the pipes in to bring domestic supply in. Without good domestic supply, we've got nothing. But there's a good balance in the budget. We've got some money for Gumbend, we've got money for roads and rest areas. Rest areas are important. I'm on the Stay Safe Committee, the Road Safety Committee, and rest areas are something that I've been pushing to say, well, we've got to actually give people a place to stop if we want to follow their local conditions, with transport being such a key thing through the pandemic and beyond. But across Barwon, I've described the budget, the 2021 budget, because people might not know this, but when we get the budget, we all lock ourselves in a room and basically go through and start pulling apart what it means for us and what it means for our community, so that we can start talking to people about it. The Barwon budget I described as unsexy, but very positive for Barwon. I can't describe wastewater treatment and sewage treatment as sexy, but it's a very positive budget because it gives us long-lasting infrastructure in our communities, gives local trades and local businesses a slice of the action, and it'll make our communities better places to live into the future. I mean, people would probably realise that there's still a lot of towns in the Barwon electorate that are still running on septics. We don't have an organised sewage system, so getting those sorts of things put in place carries us forward into the future, and in the short term puts a lot of money in our community. So also a lot of money on roads, about 150 million across the forward estimates, which is welcome, and that doesn't include the Silver City money or the COP money. So it's been a good budget for us, and I think that Condo, there's a good balance between infrastructure and amenity, because if we're going to make our towns good places to live, it needs both. So I'm reasonably happy, and I know Condo will be reasonably happy, and also happy that we were able to ask these guys early last year what they needed from a water infrastructure perspective. We asked all 13 local government areas and the unincorporated area what they needed. We compiled all that and gave it to paving. This is one of the projects that they've asked for.
Oh, well, there you go. That's probably a nice lead into the next question. I guess you've been in the hot seat as the member for Barwon since March 2019. What's been one of your proudest achievements in office to date?
Look, there's quite a few, and some of them probably never make the media or anything like that. It's just it can be simple as getting a minister to say something in a reply speech, so the judiciary or lawmakers understand what the intent was, so we don't have perverse outcomes. But probably one of the headline things is we've really put Barwon back on the political map. We've had more ministerial visits in the just under 2 years since the election than we had in the whole term, last term. So we've had more ministers crawling around Barwon. I mean, Gladys has been in the electorate twice in a week. At Mount Grenfell, at Cobar and Menindee on Monday. This is the sort of attention that Barwon deserves, and they deserve to have obviously the ministers visiting, but also making funding announcements and seeing things come to our communities, which I'm really happy to see happening. And I've welcomed anyone from any side of politics. I've invited them. I call it car therapy. I say, come and jump in the car with me, I'll take you for a drive, and
I hope they've got some spare time, because it could be a long drive. But I guess on the flip side of that coin, what's been one of the missed opportunities that you've had, or a mistake that you've made? Because I'm assuming it's quite a steep learning curve, because there's no job manual for being a member of parliament.
No, there's not, and I took that question when I read it as a question about in your life, as opposed to Barwon. So I had a really good answer to give you from life.
Well, you can give us that as well. You can give us that as well.
In life, and this is something that I took as a big learning curve. In 2003, my dad was unwell. I was working in Sydney. I said to my boss, and I wasn't the sort of person who took much leave, but I said, look, Dad's unwell. He's in Queensland. I'd like to go see him. He's never met his grandson, who was 6 months old. And anyway, the boss said, I'd really like you to stay around until the weekend and work on these projects. So I stayed around, worked on those projects till the weekend, got in the car Saturday morning, got from North Richmond to Windsor, which is about 20 minutes, and got the phone call to say he passed away. Needless to say, whenever anyone tells me now that someone's unwell in their family, I say, put everything down and go, go straight away. Because all I could do for Dad when I got there was help get him ready for his viewing, which probably sounds a bit weird, but I knew how he liked his hair, so I said, I said to the undertaker, well, let me help you get him ready, and put him on show for the last show. That was a huge regret of mine, something that has now guided how I treat my staff when I work for government and in the parliament. But in terms of working in the parliament, there's not a great number of regrets that I've had, or in terms of mistakes, I've had really good guidance. I've got good team members. I'm very lucky in Barwon to get 9 staff. Most lower house seats get 3, which gives us a huge amount of administrative horsepower, and I've got some very good people around me. Very good people who give me advice not only on policy but on specific areas of policy. So. There's nothing I think that we've really made a hash of. In fact, we tend to come out of things pretty well and floating the right way up, because we do the work in the first place, and we do the research in the first place, and make sure we're on solid ground. So, and I suppose, Sam, there has to be something that comes from just spending so many hundreds of hours out in the community talking to people. You get a good gauge on sentiment, you get a good gauge on what people want to see happen, and I think as long as you're doing what people want you to do, which is what the job is, then I think that it's a bit hard to really make a mess of anything.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. Listening, I think it's an important trait to have, and it's probably in your role as an elected member, it's probably one of the key ones. One of the things that I wanted to touch on before we finished up this morning was, you alluded to it earlier on, is through your campaign, I read your maiden speech, you spent a lot of time in the car. Now, I think you mentioned 7 nights at home during that period. What was one of the most difficult, what did you learn through that period? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Drink lots of water. Actually, I've got a funny story. I don't know if you like this or not, but I'll tell you. I was stopped at McCulloch's rest area.
It is live. There's no dump button, so that's my disclaimer.
I'll put it out there. I'm a pretty honest bloke. I stopped at McCulloch's rest area, which is about 50 k's out of Pulcania, and there was always these feral goats there that I'd stop and say good food. Anyway, because I was a bit lonely on the road.
Conversationless.
Bad. So I stopped and I put a bucket of water in the back of the ute, and I thought, right, when it's dark, I'll go and have a shower. I'll have a wash, because you're hot through the day. So I waited till it went dark, and then I went and stood on the drawbar of the caravan and got an enamel mug and started pouring water over myself to have a wash. And I could feel these little chunks in the water, and I thought, it must be gum nuts, like off the gum trees. Yeah. And it wasn't until the morning when I went back out and saw, just because there was no water anywhere, the bucket was full of bees. So I've been showering in bees without realising I was showering in bees. Luckily they didn't bite me, but that was the sort of thing, I suppose, that was what it took, I guess, in terms of commitment to say, well, I'm going to go away from the family, I'm going to go on the road, I'm going to sit in a hot caravan and wait for it to cool down so I can get 6 hours sleep or 5 hours sleep and then back on the road. There's obviously a huge personal cost in that, and a financial cost in that. I gave up my long service leave to campaign, and that was part of my transition to retirement plan. But that said, if I was asked would I do it again, absolutely I'll do it again, because I think that the only way that it's going to go for Barwon is positive. I think that we're going to see some great things happen.
Yeah, look, it's probably a nice way to finish up or get close to finishing up this morning. We've learned a lot about you, Roy, about your journey to becoming the member for Barwon. But looking into the crystal ball, looking ahead, what's your forecast, or what's your forecast, I guess, for the next 12 to 18 months for your electorate and for regional New South Wales?
So we'll start off with the electorate. I think Barwon is going to see a ramping up or an increase in attention. I think that as we get close to 2023, there's going to be more and more funding announcements and funding commitments coming into the election. And I welcome that. At the end of the day, I always say to people, if someone comes out and starts saying they're going to offer you something, say that's great, shake their hand, then ask them for more, and tell me what you've asked them for so I can follow them up. To that end, we put a promise register on the website so that people can do that. I think that we're going to see just a ramping up over the next 2 years or so, right up to the election, of people travelling around, making announcements, spending money, which again is all very welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess before we wrap up this morning, what's the easiest way for viewers that have tuned in this morning, or listeners that are listening back to the podcast, can engage with you to, I guess, keep in touch, learn about what's been happening in your electorate, or engage with you directly?
Sure. So we've got so many channels that people can reach us on. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Got a good following on Facebook, and Facebook is kind of the distillation of everything we do. It ends up on there as a story or a video or a picture with
a Facebook Live with RDA Central West.
It may do that too. Obviously we've got the website as well. I've got the 3 offices in Cobar, Narrabri and Broken Hill, and the 9 staff there who will be able to take your inquiry over the phone. We've got some people in the electorate who are not comfortable with technology, so if you want to write us a letter, write us a letter. If you want to have a talk to my staff or to me, it's only a matter of making a phone call and getting in touch and teeing up a time. So one of the things that I pride myself in is getting back to people. I hate the thought of anyone contacting my office and not being responded to. So my staff are very aware of that, acutely aware of that. So if you do contact us, whether it's through any of those channels, we will get back to you and we will sort out whatever it is you need to sort out for you.
Yeah, well, look, we'll put the links up to Roy's electorate offices and the Instagram handle, Facebook page, so if you want to engage. But look, Roy, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been fantastic to learn a little bit more about you and your journey. I guess we're coming up to Christmas. We're only a couple of weeks away now. Just to finish up, what's a Butler family Christmas tradition that you can just give our viewers a little bit of insight on?
Something, and don't be shocked by this, but it's a fight, and it's a fight over who's going to cook. That is a tradition every year.
What's on the menu?
So I've got a combination of dietary requirements in the house. I've got vegos and I've got meat eaters, and so there'll be a lot on the menu. It'll be a full table. For me, it'll probably be the old school, roast veg, gravy, and probably some sort of vegetable substitute for meat. I'll probably wash that down with a nice glass of Sauvignon Blanc. And yeah, enjoy the air conditioning.
Well, look, it's a bit early for a semi-on, but that food sounds delicious. But look, everyone else, thanks so much for joining us this year for the different business leaders breakfasts that we've brought you through RDA Central West. It's been fantastic to connect you with local business community and elected leaders through this forum. Make sure you stay safe, have a great Christmas, and until next time, have a great day, a great weekend, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks so much.